Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is where I get to chat with people who I've connected with over the years in the world of arts and entertainment. And today, as part of our Singers series, I'm very happy to have on the show Valerie Shearman. Welcome to the show, Valerie.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm so happy that you gave me a call to be part of this wonderful podcast.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Now, Valerie, I know a lot of people associate you with your late husband, Buzz.
Yeah.
And you've got a lot of things coming up, a doc and so on, around your relationship with Buzz. But I want to talk about you today.
Sure.
And I understand that you started off in music at a very young age. You were, I believe, 9 years old when you first started playing guitar.
Yeah, absolutely. A little hippie chick.
Cool. So
Like
tell me how you got into the music, really.
Well, I come from a family of musicians in Calgary, Alberta. My grandfather, I guess I heard music when I was very, very young in Calgary, and my grandfather was a fiddler for the Stampede there in Calgary. And my grandmother played acoustic guitar. So I heard playing and singing around the house a lot when I was small. But then my mother moved me to Toronto. And there she fell upon hard times. Back then, it was really, really hard in the 60s for women. There weren't a lot of advantages for them. Like if you had any problems, there's hard to find a place to go detox and things. So my mom had some issues with drugs and alcohol. So she really had a really hard time. And through all that, she lost the custody of the kids. There were 3 of us. But I felt bad for her after all those years. Now they have places they can go and, places they can detox off of drugs and alcohol. They had no help. If you needed help, you had to go to the hospital. And I guess that just wasn't good enough for some people. They didn't get the proper help or psychology behind it they give them today. So my mother lost custody of us, and I ended up in a foster home. They separated all of us, my 2 brothers and myself. And now they don't do that. They try and put me in the same foster home. So we were separated for many years, and I ended up with a fantastic family, the Blairs. And they were all musicians. They all played piano and guitar. So hence I started playing guitar there. It was actually pretty good. And I had all the teachers living in the house. There was 10 of us. So there was music constantly playing day and night, in and out. And then you play for all the family friends. You get up and they play piano, you get up and sing or play guitar. So I was pretty young starting that, and then went to school. And I ended up in the Oral Arts Festival of Ontario. And I toured with them for a long time. And I learned about stage plays and acting, a little bit of dancing. I didn't take much of dancing, but mainly the music and singing, like musical stuff. And we did really well for that. So it kind of got me that love of being around music and musicians very early on in my life. So that's where I aimed from that point. And I stayed playing 12-string guitar. My first guitar was a Kent 12-string guitar. I think they're pretty classic right now, but back then, Kent guitars are, I think, the lowest one on the totem pole. We read Mel Bay books with the teachers. So we'd go through all the Mel Bay chords. So it was actually pretty good for me back then, but now the way the kids learn now, it's so fast. Back then, it took a lot longer to learn stuff. So that was my experience with music. And I started songwriting very, very young. I always liked writing songs and stories. So writing lyrics was one of my passions. That came by itself, right?
Well, you had some traumatic experiences, and I can say from my own personal experience that I never found my own soul until I lost my son. And so losing your mom, I mean, she was around, but being separated from your mom at such a young age, you had soul very early on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And not only that, I didn't even know my dad. Didn't even know who my dad was. To this day, I don't know who he is. Actually, the Children's Aid gave him my phone number. He called me once. I think I was 19. And I had a boyfriend, Dave Smith, back then. And he was really jealous. So when my father called me, he grabbed a phone and he said, "We don't need people like you." And he hung up on him. And that was my only chance to know my dad. And I listened to him, my boyfriend, because he was my he was my family back then, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I had no really grounding. I had my foster family, but that was my real dad. I think I talked to him for like 2 or 3 minutes and hung up. And to this day, I regret that moment, you know? You just regret stuff like that. And he's probably passed away by now, but I never got to know him. I tried to get a hold of him through the Children's Aid Society. They couldn't find him. He was a native man, and the last they found him was in a reserve in Cornwall, Ontario. And the letters they sent went unanswered, so I don't know what happened. So I gave up. But yeah, I didn't know who my dad was. So it does create a lot of soul. So later on when I met Buzz, you know, like he was my world, right? So yeah, it takes a lot out of a person. I mean, I'm sure there's many people out there that go through the same thing, I'm sure, so they can understand.
Well,
it's hard when you don't have that.
Life gives us the pain, and music is the doctor.
You're right. You're right. You know what? I couldn't survive without my music. I'm doing it to this age right now, all the time, every day. I live and love my music. And that's why I married Buzz, because I lived and loved his music, you know. So, yeah, it's a really tough thing to go through, but it does give you a lot of strength. I'm sure all the other musicians out there listening can agree to that.
Absolutely. Now, I'm curious, without getting too much into the relationship, did you and Buzz ever discuss doing any work in the music together?
Yeah, actually, you know, when I met Buzz, and Buzz was playing the buzzsaw at the time, but I saw him earlier on with Moxy, but we never got together back then. I saw him, I didn't really know him. But yeah, later on in our life, he said, you and I are going to play together, you know. And I said, oh, no. You know, because I was kind of doing kind of acoustic stuff, like folky, like Janis Joplin, that kind of just guitar and solo stuff. I said, oh, no, I can't do that heavy big band stuff. I can't. And he said, no, I'm going to teach you and you're going to learn. And I was always so frightened, but he wanted to mentor me to sing and do some performing with him. And of course that didn't happen because of the accident, but he was always saying he started teaching me how to sing rock. And
just a quick editor's note for anybody who may not be old enough to remember. Buzz Shearman was the frontman and lead singer with the classic Canadian band Moxy. He unfortunately died in a tragic motorcycle accident on June 16th in 1983. And we'll be right back after this.
You know, he taught me so much more about singing and how to use my diaphragm better to really push out those notes. And so, you know, I got to say I learned a lot from Buzz when it came to singing, because I wasn't singing like that at all. I had this nice, clean, clear, like Patsy Cline kind of voice. But he taught me how to really belt out the notes.
Well,
then it takes practice.
I've wondered about that because a lot of singers that are in that same vein or style as what Buzz was don't really have so much technique as they do guts and bluster and, you know, and they're fueled by Jack Daniels kind of thing. So I wondered about the technique. Yeah, so that's interesting.
Well, yeah, you know, like, because I never knew how Buzz could still talk at the end of the show, but he had a method of that when he used that growly sound and he kind of bent back his body to get those notes and really belt them out. He had a way to project the note without it really bothering his vocal cords, because he did that for a long time. Remember, back then the bands were playing Monday to Saturday, and sometimes including Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So they did it every night. Plus, if they were having drinks or a few beers and maybe a couple Jack Daniels at the same time every night, that's got to really be hard on you, you know? But he could always talk. And then, of course, there was a reprieve in the middle. You know, he'd get to take a break, right? But he always could talk to me, still clear as a bell. Maybe a little bit more tired, but he still did it. I said, how are you talking to me right now?
Mm.
Yeah, and if those of you that saw Moxy perform, he put 150% into every show he did. You know, he was like holding that class in his hands. Like everybody was his classroom and his students. And he kind of really took them by storm and really taught them what he was singing and really sold the story on stage. And I think I learned a lot about Buzz's characteristic like that, how to really tell the story, not just vocally, but the way you move and the way your body tells the story, you know? So just standing there and singing, you've got to kind of project it with your body as well. So he did a really great job with that. Those of you that know Buzz, he really put a lot of energy into his shows, every song.
Oh, absolutely. Now, how did you make the transition into being a pro singer yourself?
How did that start? Well, you know, once you start working for a record company, meeting guys like Teenage Head and, you know, the guys in Messenger, Aerostar. I've met so many people, Eartha Kitt. I've met Bryan Adams. I've met Janet Jackson. And when you're meeting people, you're in the world of music already. And even after, unfortunately, when Buzz passed away, I spent 2 years with Brian Allen from the band Toronto. We ended up dating. And so I was immersed in so much music, so I really took on a band and just started playing back then in the 80s.
Well,
that's when I really...
Let's just let the people know that what you're talking about is you worked for Arc Sound Records, right?
Yes.
And you were in creative and artistic and manufacturing with Arc Sound Records. So that's where you met all these people. Now, I know that Brian Allen, for a while, he had a couple of positions with Attic Records and Al Mayer. And as you mentioned, Brian was the guitar player with the band Toronto. He formed that band with Ann Hollywoods. So I'll let you get back into it. I just wanted to give our listeners some context here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because when Buzz passed away, which was April 16th, 1983, we were living on a farm in Halton Hills. We had a horse boarding business, but they also had a 25 head of cattle that we were taking care of for the farmer that owned the business. But he was getting too old, so we took over the farm. And that way I could do my boarding business and Buzz could continue playing with Moxy. And what had happened there after he passed away, I couldn't possibly stay there by myself and take care of all the animals. I had to hire people, like a barn manager, and I had volunteers come up, a lot of Buzz's friends, and to help me with the horses. But my son was so little back then, and we were out in Halton Hills in the middle of, like, the country. And if there was an emergency, I thought we'd have to fly a helicopter into here to get us out of here. So I, unfortunately, made the decision to let the farm go. I sold all my horses, and Erwin took back over the farm with the cows, and I ended up moving back to the city. And that's the time that they gave me a call and said, would you like to have a job? Because they're in North York. So they said, would you like a job at our record company? We'd like to help you out. And I said, well, I don't know anything about the record business, but they said, you know what, it's okay, we'll teach you. You know, we'll give you a year to learn and we'll teach you. And I thought that was so nice of them to do that. You know, I got paid all at the same time, but I helped them. But what they did was they designed a division called Precision Records. People out there like, Bullseye Records, they don't need all these indie labels from way back then in the 80s. They know who I am because I was one of the only places they could come and do smaller runs, like do 500 to 5,000 record runs. So I learned really quick in the business how to take care of them and do their artwork, do their master. I actually went over to make sure the sound of their master was perfect because they were getting records then. There's only records and tapes then in the 80s. So I learned so much about it back then. That's how I met all these artists, yes.
Right. And then at some point, you decided to pick up the mic and go pro.
Yeah, well, everybody suggested. They said, you got such a good voice, you play guitar, why don't you go play it? I always wanted to sit in the back, and let them move forward because that's all I learned. Being with Buzz, I didn't take part of the business. I was just there. I helped out as much as I could, but I never was part of telling them what to do at all. And so I always took the back seat. But this time, people were telling me that, hey, get in the front seat and drive for a while. I said, okay, I'll try it. And after I got over my shyness of being in front of bigger crowds, you overcome that pretty quick, right? So I started getting into my own bands. I actually had a country rock band, Valerie and the Midnight Angels, for a long time. And we played all over the place. We were doing every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And plus I had my day job at the record company. And then later after that, the record company was sold, and I ended up working at Q107. Oh, sorry, no, I went to A&M Records after that. I was transferred over to A&M Records, And I was there for about 2 years, and then they amalgamated, as people know. And then I ended up working for Q107. That was my next journey in radio. So I worked at CFGM Radio and Q107 because they were owned by the same company. And it was great. I learned so much. So by then, it was in my later 20s. I learned so many things about the music business, and it just kept leading me through that path. I think it was my calling to stay in a band and keep playing. Nothing would ever stop me from playing at that time. I was always in music, playing my own music. So not really getting a deal. I didn't really want that. I was having fun playing in bars and touring around, at that time. So yeah, that was my journey in the band business, because I enjoyed the band business. I didn't really want to get into the original business at that point in time that I am now. But back then I was enjoying myself just playing in the clubs and touring around. It was fun to play with the guys, and hey, we're making some money too at the same time.
Well, when you mention original music, the thing is, I think it's really hard, especially if you're on the bar circuit, it's really hard to get people to accept your own original music. This is why there are so many top shelf tribute acts and so on out there. And I mean, I had somebody tell me years ago that when people go out to see you in the bar, they don't want to see you, Tommy. They want to see you do your best April Wine covers. They want to see you do your best Bob Seger or whatever. And so that's where a lot of people never break out of the cover band thing, because people accept that immediately. And those who are successful, typically with original songwriting and so on, will sneak one or two originals into a 40-song night. So I get where it would take a while before you kind of break the mold and get into doing your own thing, because people in the bars they're looking for a generic cover, really. And we'll be right back after this.
Yeah, and it's funny you said 40 songs. Oh boy, that's, in my band now, we do maybe 22, but that's different because you played so much later in the bar business. You needed that many songs. Now, in the business I'm in right now, you might play 22 songs, but when you said 40, I went, holy geez, that's a lot of songs. Like, remember, we did at least 30 in the cover business back then in the bar scene, so doing 45-minute sets, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and then when you ventured into Quebec, it was 7 nights, and it didn't stop at 1 or 2. I think they went to like 3 or 4 in some of the bars in Quebec.
Yeah, it's crazy how late they stay. Yeah, I played in Quebec with the Midnight Angels, and it was so strange. We'd be leaving there at 3, 4 in the morning. It's like it's getting the light out. It's like, these people, they never want to sleep, But, that's the way of the world nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, no kidding.
But yeah, the original music, and that's a real pet peeve. Right now, it's really hard for an artist to go and play their music. Like, there's not even a lot of festivals that support artists for original music and saying, we don't want covers. You got to play all original music. You won't hear that. It's really hard to find. I'd love to change that and get a grant and maybe support artists to go up there and just play their own music. Nowhere, can you think of a place where an artist could go and play their original music right now?
Well, I do it whenever I get out, but I don't play that often anymore. It's, for me, I have to kind of handpick the right gigs, because as I mentioned to you before we hit record today, I quit playing the bars a number of years ago. And that was one of the main reasons, because I just thought, 50 years later, how many times do I have to sing A Hard Day's Night?
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, I'm not a cover guy anymore. But you're right, it's tough. There aren't that many gigs out there for people like me who don't want to do the covers. But I think things go in cycles, so who knows?
I'm hoping it's going to change. I think they're trying to change and support artists. There's got to be, like I heard this summer, there might be, it's just a thing I heard, there might be another Lilith Fair for females, which I thought, wow, that's great. All original music only. So I thought, somebody's got to take the helm and make a place for people to play their original stuff. Of course, you got to give them your album and say, here's what we're going to be playing, so they know beforehand what you're playing. I understand that, but you need somewhere to have a venue for them to go play their music. And everybody's making CDs, and what do they do with them? Where are they putting their CDs? They're at home. Or they give them to their friends, and they pass them out. So you want to sell your music, and they need more venues for that. Right now, there's a lot of cover bands and tribute bands out there, because a lot of the older artists are they're passing away or they're retiring. And the people want to still hear that music, which is true. And you totally understand that.
Well, I talked to Holly Woods, who was the original singer from the band Toronto, and I asked her how she felt about these bands. Trooper's another one. There are no original members of Trooper right now, but there's an official Trooper band. And what Holly said to me was, well, if you were a business and you had to retire, wouldn't you want that business to continue on being successful? So I kind of get that. It's weird for us as lifelong fans, especially if you are a true fan and you know everybody in the band. There's a version of the Guess Who out there touring that not a single original member, and most of the people that are going to the shows don't have a clue. So it's a weird dichotomy.
It really is. Like, I'm going to see Chicago in Aurelia on the 8th. I've been invited as a guest, which I was so impressed. I really love that. But I know that there's only 3 original members in Chicago. And I remember they worked with Moxy, I think, on a few dates. They opened for one another. So it was kind of cool that I was invited to go to see the band. So it's in Aurelia at the casino.
Yeah, Casino Rama.
So I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, there's only 3 members in that band.
That's a good average number of surviving members, really, when you look at it.
That's what I thought.
Like I mentioned, the band Toronto. Now, Holly has definitely given Michelle Truman her blessing, and she's got a really positive attitude towards the business carrying on. But there's so many bands out there that there are no original members left, and there's a lot of really good tributes and so on. But nostalgia, we still want April Wine. Even though Miles Goodwin is now retired from live shows, we still want Boston, and we're not going to see the original Boston lineup live on stage. You might get Tom Schultz, or you might have Tom Schultz licensing somebody else in his role, but Peter Frampton hasn't got much left. I had a local aficionado of the business say to me one day, well, nobody cares about us anymore. And I thought, I don't know if that's absolutely true.
I don't think so, yeah.
But the thing is, we have 2 different worlds in music. We have what's new and we have what's ours.
Yes, that's true. That's what I'm saying. There's got to be an even split somewhere, but you're right about that. A lot of the original bands are starting to retire, but I was used to think, what do they think about the tributes out there? Well, think about it. If you wrote those songs and they're out there performing your songs, they're going to continue getting new audiences for you. So those audiences are still going to hear that music. So we get a lot of young people still hearing Heart, So they love it, the fact that you're out there as a tribute, continuing to sell their music for them, So I would think that would be great. So I think they like the tributes.
Well, that's a big part of the music for me, is when I do play a festival and there's, like a 20-something-year-old person who it says something, like, wow, is this ever great? And it just gives me hope for the future to know that music is still a force to be reckoned with for the new generations, even though their music isn't for me. Drake isn't for me.
Yeah, that's okay,
but it's for somebody,
It's for somebody in the years to come.
Yeah, and
Drake's going to want his music continuing on,
It just gives me hope and a real good feeling, knowing that when people like you and I go out and do our thing. There are younger people who really get into it.
Yeah, they always say, who did that song? And I'll say, oh, well, there was a band, back then in the 70s, started up, their name was Heart, And they never knew who they were. And they said, oh, I love that stuff. So you're getting new ears all the time for their music, and which is great. So we're out there, getting out there performing all their original hits continuously, and which is great. But that's why I always say, one day you got to do your own music, but you can't put the two together when you're out there doing that kind of show. So, which is a dream one day of mine, to get out there and perform my own original music one day. And, we'll get there, won't we?
I'm absolutely 100% positive you will. And, I do want to talk more about Just Heart and about what's happening down the road with you. But I think, Valerie, we're going to have to talk about all the rest of this exciting stuff in part 2. So
absolutely.
For now, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day. And until next time.
No problem.
Cheers.
Cheers to you, Siobhan.
Well, that was a fun conversation, and you'll have to make sure and come back for part 2 of my chat with Valerie Shearman. We're going to talk about Just Heart, her top-shelf Heart tribute that plays casinos, etc., and a whole lot more. Now here, for your listening pleasure, brand new music from Valerie Shearman. This will be on her upcoming recording project. This is In the Healing of My Heart. Enjoy.
That just leaves me feeling so unwell. You were wrong to do what you did to me, baby. And those bad days are over now. I was under your spell. No, 'cause I can't expect you to be a good man. No, and I
Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including recording, editing, guest acquisition, etc. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a clip from my original composition, The Burn. All rights reserved. And hey, if you like the show, why not help us out, buy me a coffee, subscribe, hit the like button, and until next time, cheers.